Today's lesson is Utah Middle School Math Project 1.2a, which is converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. We're going to see how much you know with this warm-up, where I ask you to convert 1/4, the fraction 1/4, to a percent. Now, there are lots of ways that we could do this. Here's the way that I think is the very best. When it is per cent, the root word here is cent. As we've discussed previously, cent, there are 100 cents in a dollar. There are 100 years in a century. So this root word means 100. So percent means per 100. And if you take a look at this, the fraction was 1/4, and I want to know what is that equal to as a percent. We now have equivalent ratios. We now have a percent proportion that we could solve, because I don't know what this percent is, but I can solve this equation. We could also do it the old-fashioned way. How does a 4 change to a 100? And that would be by multiplying by 25. So using those equivalent ratios, 1 is also going to be multiplied by 25, and that is going to give me whatever this x value is, and 1 times 25 is 25. So 25 hundredths is 25%. We could also write 25% as a decimal, because it's 25 out of 100, or in other words, 25 in the hundredths place. From a decimal, we can convert to a percent. This is 25 in the hundredths place, which means 25%. So that just changes to 25, and then we include that percent symbol. What I really did is I moved that decimal place over twice. Let's practice converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. What we're going to do is kind of make it visual first, fill out these models first so that we can understand what it looks like, and then we'll be able to do it numerically without those models. It says here to the left is a 10 by 10 grid. Why do you think it is called a 10 by 10 grid? Luis? There's 10 rows of 10. Here's one row, and in this row, there's 10. Second row, 10. Third row, 10, etc. So what I want you to do is understand, if this is a 10 by 10 grid, how many total boxes are there? Andrew? 100. So use the grid to show the fraction 6 hundredths. How am I going to do that? What is 6 hundredths going to look like on this blank 10 by 10 grid? Stephen? Exactly. Here's 100 total. We need to fill in 6 of them so that we can show 6 out of 100. It says explain why this model is correct. I think that's a pretty easy explanation. We have 6 shaded, and there are 100 total. Based on that, let's answer the next question. Here's another 10 by 10 grid. Some are already shaded. What fraction is shown in this grid? And then we'll talk about the next one. What is that decimal equivalent? What is the fraction that's shown in this grid? Riley. Good. That was quick counting. Quick ways that we can count without having to count every single one. You can see that this whole column of 10, a second column of 10, so we have 20 out of 100. Now, technically, our fractions should be simplified. I don't want to focus on that a whole bunch right now, because what we're really going to be doing today is unsimplifying fractions to put them over 100. What is that decimal equivalent for this fraction? Kind of a pre-assessment type question here. What do you know? How can I write this fraction as a decimal? Kale? Good guess, but no. Let's talk about why that's not correct. If I write it as 2.0, that's a whole number 2. Do we have 2 whole grids filled in? No, we don't have 2 whole grids filled in, but that's what that means. So we need to fix this. Bladen. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. We can always come back to you once you get your thoughts together. That's okay. Emily? It is 0.2. Let's make sense of why, because this might be hard to see. To make it easier, I'm going to write it as 0.2, 0. And we're going to have a quick conversation about place value. Here is the decimal point. Right here, this is our ones. Right next to the ones, when I go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, what do? I go to tens, and that's going to be 0 ones, but 1, 10. I'm not going to keep going. I'm going to go on this side now. If this is, let's go one more maybe, actually. After we get to 9 tens and 9 ones, what number do I reach? 9 tens and 9 ones. What else do I get after that, Orion? 100. So this is the hundreds place value. But here's the decimal. What are we going to have on the other side of that decimal? Since it goes ones, tens, hundreds, on this side, what are we going to call it? Seth? Close. Tenths. Because we need to differentiate between tens and smaller than that whole amount, tenths, right? Okay, so this is tenths. What is this going to be in the next place value? I need to write that sideways so I can fit it all in there. After the tenths, back to Bladen. Exactly, hundredths. And after that, if we were to keep on going, that would be thousandths. Good. Thousandths. So I just want to focus on this right here. This is 20 out of 100. I'm going to write that down. We say 20 hundredths, but we can also think of it as 20 out of 100. Oh, thank you. Do you know the proper way of saying this? I could say 20 out of 100, but there's an even better way of saying it. Bladen, what is the proper way to say it? Yeah, exactly. 20 hundredths. So let's write that down too. So how do I write that in decimal form? We have the number 20. Where does that number end? In the hundredths place. Now, that being said, remember how mathematicians are lazy. If it's just a 0 in the hundredths place, we typically don't write it. Just like we could say 0.200 or another 0 or another 0. Is that changing the number at all? Is that changing the number at all, Stephen? No, it's not. So I'm lazy, and even though this is 20 in the hundredths place, typically we're too lazy and we would just write it as 0.2. So please understand that 20 in the hundredths place is the same as 2 in the tenths place. Think about this. 20 cents, 20 little pennies is the same as 2 dimes, right? So these are equivalent. Sometimes we drop that 0 at the end. Based on that, I want you to put that to practice. Will you please shade the amounts shown for A, 0.25. Think about the correct way to say that decimal. 0.4, what is the true way we should say that? Hopefully by saying it the right way, you'll know how much to shade. 0.05 and 0.7. Try this on your own first, and then we'll come back together on the recording to do it together. With your groups, ready, set, go. All right, when I correctly say this number, this is 0 and, see the number 25? That number 25 is ending in the hundredths place. So I would say 0 and 25 hundredths. That tells me how many I need to shade. I'm going to shade 25. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A second row is going to be 20. And then 5 more. B, I see the number 4, so I'm going to shade just 4. That was the mistake that I saw. Fix that mistake. What's wrong with that? I saw the number 25, so I shaded 25. I see the number 4, so I'm going to shade 4. What's wrong with that? Aaliyah. Great job. Yes. This is a hundreds grid, right? A 10 by 10 grid. There's 100 spots. So even though this is a 4 here, what really is in the 100 spots? A 0. So how many should I have shaded? Not just 4, but 40. Yes, Bladen? Yeah, exactly. Think of it as money. That is exactly what I like to teach students until one year when I tried teaching it as money and they didn't know how to count money, so that didn't help. But if you guys know how to count money, then that is going to help us understand that. So 0.4, that's like 4 dimes, because this is 4 in the tenths place, 4 dimes. But that's the same as 40 pennies, 40 in the 100th spot. And here's another clue here. I see the number 5, but I remember what you guys said last time, right? So I'm going to add the 0 at the end, and now I'm going to shade 50 of them. There we go. Done. Fix that thinking. Steven.
So our group was confused on the 0.05, and then Trace just shaded 5 of them. And I was like, okay, so we shaded 25 of these, 4 of these, and 7 of the other one. No, it's 25, 40, 5, and then 7.
Exactly.
We got it tricked. Me and Riley were stuck.
Remember how you said, think of it as money? So if this is money, right, this is 0.5, that would be 5 pennies. So I would shade 5 of these pennies. You said think of it like money, so thinking of it like money helps. What if I added a 0? Should I then change or shade 50? No, because it still is 5 in the hundredths spot, 50 in the thousandths. But is this cut into 1,000 pieces? No, so we're not going to keep trying to shade. Yeah, so if we're going to be thinking of it like money, which we can because of the hundredths, then that's another clue there too. So 0.7, that's a 7 in the tenths place. So I'm going to shade in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Why did I count to 7 instead of to 70? Talk me through that. Why did I count to 7 instead of 70? Luis? Yeah, there's 7 rows, and in each row there's 10. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Each one of these is a tenth, right? Because there's 10 of them in there. So I shaded 7 tenths or 70. Let's put that at the end too. 70 hundredths. Okay. Let's now write the fraction equivalents for each of these. We have 25 in the hundredths place, right? So that's going to be 25 out of 100, or 25 hundredths. Can this be simplified? Yes. Anyone know what it is simplified? 25 hundredths. What is that going to be simplified, Seth? That would be a percent, but I want a simplified fraction. A simplified fraction. Emily? 1/4. If you have 25 cents out of $1, isn't that 1 quarter? 1/4 of $1. B, what is that going to be? What is the decimal equivalent? We can see 40 out of 100. I'm lazy though. You're lazy too, right? So instead of writing 40 out of 100, what could I have written? This is a 4 in the tenths place. So I could have written, oops, sorry, 40 out of 100. I could have written 4 tenths. This still isn't simplified. Anyone know what this is simplified? All right, looks like we need to practice our simplifying fractions. Ashlyn? It is 2/5. Good. We'll have to have a discussion on simplifying fractions. C. Well, I'm going to make you guys try it. Try C and D with your groups. Try C and D while I get some simplifying fractions practice. C, what is the fraction for C? Kale. For C? Oh, look at, what do we have? 0, 5, and that 5 is ending in the hundredths place, so 5 hundredths. Yes, we need to simplify, and again, we'll practice this in a second. Anyone know already what the simplified version of 5 hundredths is? Luis? It is 1/20th. We'll be practicing this. And D. What is the fraction? Cal, you want to try it again? Yes, it is 7 tenths. It's 7 in the tenths place. Could we have written 7D in the hundredths place? Yeah. But then we'd still have to simplify it to 7 tenths. And this is simplified. So sounds like we need to have a conversation about simplifying fractions. So there are lots and lots of ways that we can simplify fractions. This is what I like to do. If you already are a professional at simplifying fractions a different way, that's great. But let's talk about this. I'm going to start here with the 25 hundredths. Okay, when I'm simplifying fractions, I'm writing out the factors. Okay, so what are some things that I can multiply together to make 25? What are some numbers I can multiply to make 25? Emily. Yeah, 5 and 5. So 25 is equal to 5 times 5, right? Okay, going to start there. 100. There are some numbers that I can multiply to make 100. Probably the easiest ones to come up with are 10 and 10, right? However, do you see how we already have 5s up here? I want to try and look for 5s. So I'm going to go a step further. 10. Can we take 10 apart? What are some numbers we can multiply to make 10? Luis? 2 times 5, exactly. So look at what I'm doing here. I have 5 times 5 still up on the top in that numerator. On the bottom, this 10, I'm like, hey, wait a second. 10 is 2 times 5. So I'm just rewriting that 10 as 2 times 5. And this other 10, guess what? It's also 2 times 5. So I'm going to write that again. Now, eyes on the screen. Get out your calculators and see if this still works. What is 2 times 5 multiplied by 2 times 5? 2 times 5 times 2 times 5. Hopefully you can figure that out. Caitlin? Yeah, are we surprised by that? We shouldn't be, because 2 times 5 is 10, 2 times 5 is 10, and 10 times 10 is 100. So it makes sense, right? This is all just broken up. Okay, so now that I have it all the way broken up into what we call the prime factors, now I can say, look at what they have in the top and in the bottom. Eyes on the screen. I have students who are distracted. Eyes on the screen. Just randomly, I'm going to ask the question, what is any number divided by itself? 1. Do you see that in here? Do you see any number divided by itself? So what happens with that 5 divided by 5? It turns into 1. What about this 5 divided by 5? It turns into 1, right? So when I do that, what is it that I have left after all that's done? Let's focus on the denominator first. That divided out, so what do I have left? 2 times 2, and what's 2 times 2? 4. What do I have left in the top? 1, yes, good job, because really, 5 times 5 times 1, right? There's always going to be a 1 there, a factor of 1. So I've divided out this 5, divided out that 5. What do I have left? 1/4. So again, there are lots of ways that you can simplify fractions. That is the way that I think works out the very best. Let's practice that with part B. Again, we already know the answer. We already know that it simplifies to 2/5. Let's break it down into its prime factors though. So I have 40 out of 100. What are some numbers that we can multiply to make 40? Seth? 5 and 5 times 4 doesn't multiply to give me 40. Five times what is 40? Trace, help them out. 5 times 8. 5 times 8. Okay, with that in mind, 100. I want to break up 100 too. Now, I will back up and we'll do this one a different way as well, so don't worry if you're seeing it differently. I want to break up 100. What are some things I can multiply to make 100? Aaliyah. 10 times 10. Let's just go with that again, right? Do you guys see anything in the numerator and denominator that we can divide out yet? No. So let's keep on going. What can we multiply to make 5? Just 5 and 1, right? So I'm not going to waste my time with that one. Let's focus on this one. What can I multiply to make 8? Riley? 2 times 4. So let's not forget, we still have the 5. But that 8, I'm going to write as 2 times 4, right? Okay. And same thing down here with the 10. We already did that in our last problem, right? 10 can be rewritten as 2 times 5. Oh, so I should pick a different color. 2 times 5. And this 10 can be written as 2 times 5. Do you see some things now that we can divide out? Yeah, so let's start dividing them out. I see a 5 divided by 5, that divides out. I see a 2 divided by 2, that divides out, right? Okay. What do I have now? Left in the numerator, I have just 4. And in the denominator, I have 2 times 5, which is 10. Huh. Isn't that interesting? Look at where I got to. Am I done simplifying? Nope. We still have something else, right? So what are the factors of 4? Let's keep on breaking it up. What things can I multiply to make 4? Matthew. 2 times 2. And what are the things that I can multiply to make 10? We've answered that question before, right? That would be 2 times 5. Do you see something that can divide out? That divides out. And now, finally, I'm left with 2/5. So, I'm not going to keep on going with this, but I want you to understand, when I'm simplifying fractions, these are all the things that I'm doing in my head. Okay, and I am doing them in my head because I've been practicing this for a really, really long time. Some of you guys are probably pretty good at this and can do this pretty quick. Great. If you're struggling, break it out into its factors and see what can be divided out in the numerator and the denominator. We need to move on because this is not the point of this lesson. That's just one of those things that you should know. Emily? Do you have that calculator at home? You have that calculator at home? Does everybody have a calculator that's going to simplify fractions for them? I'm going to go ahead and say no. Not everybody has a calculator that can simplify fractions. So while you're in class, can you use your tools? Sure. At home, is that going to help you with your homework? Not unless you have those same tools. So I'm trying to provide ways that you can do this even when you don't have those same tools in front of you. We need to continue on because, again, that was not the point of the lesson, but we do need to get to the rest of this lesson. Now we have the fraction 1/2. We need to shade 1/2. What does that mean? Does it mean I'm just shading 1? What does that mean, Kale? Good. You did a lot of thought there. I'm going to put that thought into writing. We're shading half of it, right? But how many blocks are there total? 100. So somehow, look at we're using equivalent fractions, that 2 changes to a 100. How? Because we're multiplying by 50. So what am I going to do up here? Multiply by 50. And 1 times 50 is equal to 50. So how many of those should I be shading in? 50 of them, just as Kale said. So all those same thoughts that Kale said super fast, that's the work that I would show on how we would get there. half of it, which is half of 50, or half of 100 is 50. So 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. What is that as a decimal then? Now we have shaded 50 out of 100, so I would write 50 in the hundredths place. Do I really need that 0 at the end? So I could be lazy and just say 5 in the tenths place. What is that going to be as a percent? This is where we need to tie it all in together, kind of like our warm-up. If this is 0.5, if I keep it as 50 in the hundredths place, how many hundreds do I have? 50. So that's 50 hundreds. When it's a percent, I say hundreds like this with the percent symbol. 50%. Will you please practice that with these other ones? We're going to pause the recording and let students work on these ones. 1/4. That means I need to shade 1/4 of 100. What does that look like? How many do I need to shade? It's out of 100. How does that 4 change to a 100? We multiply by 25. What am I going to do here with the 1? Multiply by 25. So I need to shade 25 out of these hundreds. So that's going to be 2 full rows plus an extra 5. What is that as a decimal? All we have to do is say the fraction the right way. 25 hundredths. So that's going to be 25 ending in the hundredths place. What is that then as a percent? This is 25 in the hundredths place, or 25%, meaning the same thing as hundreds. 1/10. That means out of 100, how does that 10 change to 100? We multiply by 10. So using our equivalent ratios, 1 times 10 is 10. So I should be shading 10 of them. How do I write that as a decimal? That's going to be 10 out of 100, or 10 ending in the hundredths place. But, I mean, do we really need that 0 at the end? No, but if we keep it there, then it's pretty easy to see that 10 in the hundredths place is 10%. When we write it as a decimal, is it okay to be lazy and not have that 0? Yeah. And last one, 1/5 is equal to 5 changes to 100 by multiplying by 20. So 1 times 20 is 20. I should shade 20 of them here. So what is the decimal version of this? This is 20 ending in the hundredths place, which means that's 20%. And now that I've written it like that, I'm going to be lazy and get rid of that 0 at the end. Okay. Now we need to fill in these boxes so that we can figure out how we're going to do our homework. How can I go from a fraction to a decimal? The truth is, we haven't had to do it on this assignment. You might have to do it for your homework. Divide it. That's what that really means. For example, will you please type into your calculator 1 divided by 4? When you type 1 divided by 4 into your calculator, do you see how it first changes it to a fraction? And then you hit Control-Enter, and it will tell you, oh, 0.25? That's because fractions and division are very similarly related, right? So just divide it. If we have it pretty easy, then we can change the fraction to a fraction out of 100. So I'm going to put or, change it to a fraction out of 100. And when it's changed to a fraction out of 100, that tells us how many's in the hundredths place. Once I have it in the hundredths place, how can I go from the hundredths place to a percent? Fun fact, they mean the same thing, right? Hundredths means percent. They mean the same thing. So, really, truly what I'm doing, let me show you an example. We had 0.25. That's 25 in the hundredths place, so I write it as 25%. Look at what we're doing. See how that decimal place is just moving over? And then we add that percent symbol. And last, what if I have a percent? How do I change that percent to a fraction? That one's easy. We didn't have any practice like that. But percent means per 100. So that means we have a fraction out of 100. Yes, Stephen?
Doesn't that mean the percent, which is, say, 25%, wouldn't that just go on top of the fraction as 25?
Exactly. So 25 hundredths is 25 per, or sorry, 25%, right? 25% means 25 per 100, and then we simplify. Your homework is this homework section. Write 45% as a simplified fraction. Can you do that? Let's do it together. 45% is 45 per 100. Can you simplify that? Sure. Might need to do some work like we did in class. What about 0.45? Can we write that as a percent? Yeah, because it's 45 ending in the hundredths place. So that's 45%. Skip on down. You're also going to see some of this. Here's a fraction. Can you write this fraction as a decimal and a percent? Yeah, 6/10 is a 6 in the tenths place. What is that as a percent? 6D in the hundredths place, so 60%. Okay, the rest of it is homework. That's it for today's lesson. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.